हेलो। हेलो।
हेलो।
ये सच निधि।
हाँ संजना, ये अभी जो हेलो हाय बाय द वे, अभी कितने लोग हैं जो रिसेंट ज्वाइनी है?
रिसेंट ज्वाइनिंग 8।
नंबर अप्रोक्सीमेटली।
एक एफसीए ग्रुप का पर्टिकुलर पूछ रहे हो या फिर एज अ
नहीं नहीं,
होल?
पूरा टोटल टोटल तरह
टोटल
मित्रा में।
25-26 थे।
रिसेंटली।
हम्म।
और इसमें से कितने लोग हैं जिनको कोई जिन्होंने कोई रीजन दिया है कि अभी हम नहीं अवेलेबल है?
अभी इसमें से कुछ लोग ही हैं एक्चुअली सबके एग्जाम सब खत्म हो ही चुके हैं, तो आई गेस सभी अवेलेबल हैं।
एग्जाम्स तो यार एक महीने पहले ही हो गए होंगे ना।
नहीं, अभी भी कुछ कुछ के थे जो दिसंबर में 21-25 ऐसे करके, एक का है जिसका Jan 5 में खत्म होगा, 5 के बाद तो।
ठीक है, तो अप्रोक्सीमेटली जिनके एग्जाम्स नहीं है, मतलब एक दो दिन पहले भी खत्म हो गए हो जिनके, ऐसा नहीं कि आज ही, जिनके पहले खत्म हो, दो तीन दिन पहले तक भी, 25 तक भी मान लो, उनमें से कौन है जो बिना कोई रीजन के मतलब नहीं है ज्वाइन के? कितने लोग हैं, मतलब नंबर, बस नंबर के हिसाब से।
ऐसे तो ये तो एफसीए वाला ग्रुप का मीटिंग हो रहा है ना, तो एफसीए में जो जितने लोग हैं
में तो
उनमें
मेजोरिटी
से
चंक तो एफसीए में ही है ना।
ऐसा बात नहीं है। एफसीए में भी हैं और फिर ईएसजी में भी थे, फिर क्रिएटिव टीम में भी थे।
अच्छा ठीक है, एफसीए में से।
तुम टैग करना चाह रहे हो क्या?
नहीं नहीं नहीं, लिस्ट बनाना चाह रहे हैं और एक वार्निंग दो दो इन लोग को।
नहीं, वार्निंग दे चुके हैं। अब जो मीटिंग ये लास्ट स्टेप जो नहीं प्रेजेंट करेगा ना, सर बोले हैं कि हटा देना।
उनमें से हटा देना, और एक मतलब वो देखना कि जैसे अभी हम लोग सिर्फ चार लोग हैं, और मान लो हर्षिता का हो गया और एकदम मंजीत रंजीत, उसके अलावा ऐसा ना हो कि सात आठ के बाद पूरा ग्रुप खाली हो। उसमें से कुछ कुछ चूज कर लेना जो लोग रीजन बताए या जिनका एग्जाम है।
हाँ, वो है कुछ कुछ 3-4 लोग हैं जैसे
और कुछ,
एफसीए में एक्टिव है, जानवी प्रंजल, ये दोनों ही हैं एफसीए में जो मोस्टली एक्टिव रहता है, और नैना शर्मा, ये
अब जैसे
तीन।
20 लोग हैं तो हम मान के चल रहे हैं 10 लोग का रीजन दिया हुआ होगा कि हम क्यों नहीं है। ठीक है, नैना वैना को मिला के। अब उसके अलावा 10 के अलावा जो बाकी के 10 है, उनमें एक बार एक हल्का सा वार्निंग दो, जिसका
नहीं,
रिप्लाई
वार्निंग
आता है।
हर्ष नहीं दी, वार्निंग ऑलरेडी दिया हुआ है, बोली ना।
मतलब इंटीमेट कर दो निकालने के पहले कि निकाल रहे हैं आपको क्योंकि आप एक्टिव नहीं थे।
यार फिर वो दोगे तो वो फिर अपना एक्सक्यूज लेकर के आ जाएंगे अननेसेसरी।
नहीं बट वो ठीक है, बट उस इतना टाइम नहीं देना है ना उनको उस रिप्लाई के लिए। उस रिप्लाई के लिए थोड़ा सा टाइम देना है और उसके बाद हटा देना है सीधा।
हम्म।
सर का ऑलरेडी डायरेक्शन है ही, अभी एक हम लिख ही दिया, अब इससे ज्यादा क्या चाहिए। बट एटलीस्ट मेरा ये है कि थोड़ा प्रोसीजरली फेयर रहेगा कि अगर हम लोग निकालने वाले टाइम पे भी एक बार बस बता दें कि निकाल रहे हैं। बाद में रोए होएगा नहीं कोई, इसमें ये रहेगा एटलीस्ट। बताया तो था ही इतनी बार, वो तो वार्निंग की तरह ले लिया जाएगा। बट एक बार बस बोल दें इन लोगों को
हम्म।
कि भाई बस सर्टिफिकेट के लिए है सब यहाँ पे। एक मैसेज डालने में क्या जा रहा है कि हम भाई हम नहीं रहेंगे, एक महीने के लिए बोल दे कि भाई हम एक महीने के लिए नहीं है। सर तो कोई माइंड करते नहीं है इस चीज को लेके। और ज्वाइन
हम्म।
करके छोड़ देना कि भाई कोई रीजन भी नहीं देना।
हाँ, यही है ना, ये लोग पहले रीजन नहीं देते हैं, लाइक जब मेंशन कर दो फिर
बाद में भी
एक्सक्यूज
नहीं
लेकर
देते
के
ना
आते
भाई,
हैं।
बाद में भी तो नहीं देते ना।
नहीं, जब पर्टिकुलर तुम मेंशन कर दो ना तो फिर वो एक्सक्यूज देते हैं कि ये रीजन था, ये रीजन था, बट वो सिर्फ एक्सक्यूजेज ही रहते हैं। जब
और भी
तुमको इश्यू है
अब
तो तुम
समझो
पहले ही
तुम्हारा,
बोलो ना।
तुम समझो कि तुम्हारा पहला महीना है और तुम तब ये काम कर रहे हो। पहला महीना भी अभी खत्म नहीं हुआ है। बोलो इन लोगों को भाई अब की सॉरी।
हम्म।
हो सकता है कि सारे सात का भी हम लोग टाइम जल्दी रखे, क्या पता इस वजह से भी हो इशू।
नहीं, ऐसा ऐसा नहीं है
आज
एक्चुअली, 7:30 इसलिए रखा है ना क्योंकि क्योंकि सर भी फिर आ रहे थे और फिर मंजीत का भी 8:30 से था कुछ काम, तो इसलिए मैंने
मंजीत
थोड़ा
किधर
सा।
है अभी?
हाँ, बट अभी तक वो बाहर है, वो पहुंचा नहीं है होटल की मीटिंग ज्वाइन कर सके। सो सर का वेट है, देखो सर अगर अभी नहीं आएंगे तो फिर स्टार्ट करते हैं हम लोग भी।
ठीक है। कोई एक ज्योति करके अभी ज्वाइन हुई थी, वो चली गई फिर एकदम से। ये सब है भाई। अब प्रॉब्लम है ना इन लोग के साथ। रंजीत मैसेज देख रहा है। हर्ष में तो छोड़ दिया क्या?
हाँ, वो सर्टिफिकेट ले लिया है वो, उसको और भी कुछ काम थे तो।
हम्म।
हर्षनिधि, एक बार सर को फोन करके पूछना वो कब तक आएंगे मीटिंग में। अगर ज्यादा लेट होगा तो फिर मीटिंग स्टार्ट करते हैं।
हाँ ठीक है, हम फोन कर रहे हैं सर। यार सर तो कोई रिस्पॉन्स नहीं दे रहा है। कॉल करके देख लो एक बार, आप टेक्स्ट करके देख लो।
टेक्स्ट सीन नहीं किए थे ना, इसलिए कॉल करने बोलती। अच्छा ठीक है, नो इशू। प्रांजल, तुम स्टार्ट कर दो अपना प्रेजेंटेशन।
Okay. Am I audible?
यस यू आर।
Hello. Okay, okay. So, do I have to share the screen?
यस यस, वेट, लेट मी मेक यू द। प्रांजल, यू कैन शेयर द स्क्रीन नाउ।
Okay. Mm, Not able to find the option to share the screen. So I have to click on the share button, and then which option has to be selected?
प्रांजल, जब तुम शेयर स्क्रीन पे क्लिक करोगे ना तो फिर तुमको पेज दिखाएगा कि इस पेज को आपको शो करना है। फोन है ना तुम्हारे पास तो।
हाँ, फोन है तो यहाँ शेयर पर क्लिक कर रहा हूँ ना मैं। तो
हम्म।
यहाँ पर फिर बहुत सारे ऑप्शंस आ रहे हैं, जैसे कैमरा, व्हाइट बोर्ड, यूआरएल, डॉक्यूमेंट, पिक्चर।
तो यस, तुम्हारा किस चीज पे बना हुआ है रिपोर्ट?
फॉरेस्ट कंजर्वेशन मेजर्स इन
नहीं
इंडिया एंड
नहीं नहीं
चाइना।
नहीं, लाइक पीडीएफ है क्या?
यस यस, पीडीएफ है।
हाँ, तो डॉक्यूमेंट सेलेक्ट करके देखो।
दिख रहा है क्या अभी?
हाँ दिख रहा है।
Okay. So forest conservation in India and China. First of all, we have to understand the importance of forest. It gives us it is cover a large area of forest is covered with trees, and it provides us with wide varieties of useful products, and it is also a home to different kinds of species. So there is no denying that they act as the lungs of our planet. And it also helps us in combating climate change. It absorbs different kinds of carbon and other harmful gases. And after this realization, different companies have tried to come up with measures to control the forest de- to control the deforestation and protect the forest. So first, here we are going to compare the forest conservation measures taken by India and China. First, we will start with the history of forest conservation measures. India. So the British government introduced the Indian Forest Act in 1865, but their major aim was to take control of the timber. They wanted to meet their commercial needs in order to build railways, ships, etc. This act then underwent uh, a few amendments in 1878 and then 1977, 1927, sorry, which divided the forests into different categories: the reserved forest, protected forest, and village forest based on their purposes. And these amendments further strengthened the control of the British government in India. Finally, after independence, Forest Conservation Act in 19 was passed in 1980 by the Indian Parliament. It it stated that the diversion of forest in a region for any non-forest purpose would require the permission of the central government, and also they would have to compensate for the losses of forest. So for that they would have to take afforestation measures in some other region that would make up for the losses due to the diversion. So this practice was called compensatory afforestation. This act also took into considerations the suggestions and concerns as well as the rights of the tribal communities. Now coming to China, uh, People's Republic of China during the mid 20th century, that is during the era of Mao's during the 1950s, they focused a lot on the industrial development and production of timber, which led to heavy forest loss. Finally, 1981, hmm, China introduced forest law, which marked the change in their stance towards the forest conservation issue. It classified the forest into different categories on the basis of their economic and ecological values, and asked for the participation of local communities in forest management, and also laid down fines and punishment for violation of the provisions in this law. So, comparing India's approach with China's approach towards the forest conservation. So, the major guiding force in India, the major the major guiding force of Indian forest conservation in India has been Indian Forest Act, and initiatives such as Green India Mission and other compensatory forest schemes. Whereas in China, the forest law, along with large scale reforestation programs, have been the major guiding force for forest conservation. This is a picture which shows how they have been able to convert a desert into greenland. This was one of the reforestation projects of China in Muzu Desert. Funding, while the programs, forest conservation programs are funded by the central government, state government, and also private firms in India, the China's large-scale reforestation programs are funded by the government, and there is very limited private participation. The major purpose of afforestation programs in India is to balance the ecological as well as commercial use. To maintain ecological balance and also meet the commercial needs. Both native and commercial trees are planted, but the Chinese reforestation programs place more emphasis on growing trees which would serve their commercial purposes, such as bamboo production. Constitutional backing. The Indian constitution lays more emphasis on forestry activities as compared to that of China. Implementation, the effectiveness of implementation of forest conservation measures of China have been more efficient. This is due to centralized control of the execution of these programs. While in India, the central and the state government both have to coordinate in along with the local communities as well. But there is no opposition in case of China, so it is much easier to effectively implement the schemes and programs. Local community rights. India has a separate act called Forest Rights Act, which aims to protect the rights and livelihoods of tribal communities in a forest. And if we look at the case of China, although they ask for the participation of local forest communities, they do not care much about the protection of local community rights. And they do not even take into consideration the problems faced by the local communities. They just have to accept what the government asks them to do. Then if we look at the categorization of the forest, Indian Forest Act categorizes the forest into reserve protected village and community forest, whereas China categorizes their forest into protective, commercial, special use, and other kinds of forest. So the categorization clearly states the differences in the priorities of the two nations. China is more concerned with the utilization of forest, as we can understand through their categorization. Enforcement. China is much more strict with their implementation of the forest law, and there are heavy penalties for violations and illegal activities. While in India, the implementation of these laws face challenges due to opposition, lack of resources, as well as corruption, as the officials at times mm, do not do their work properly and take bribes in order to somehow just not utilize the fund properly. Now, if we look at the forest cover percentage, the forest cover percentage has grown significantly in China, but we have to take into account that the forest, the percentage of natural forest in China is much lower as compared to that of India. India lays on protecting the natural forest, but they cut down the natural forest, but at the same time plant artificial forest to somehow make up for the losses. But we can't say that one nation has a better approach as compared to another. Both the nations have made significant progress, and both have set an example for many other nations to follow. Thank you.
वेरी नाइस प्रांजल, रिपोर्ट बहुत अच्छा था, प्रिसाइज था, इंफॉर्मेटिव था और इजी था, अंडरस्टैंडेबल था। वर्ड्स बहुत इजी यूज किए थे तुमने।
Thanks.
या हर्षनिधि, यू हैव एनीथिंग टू से? हर्षनिधि, ये नो प्रॉब्लम। मेरे ख्याल से प्रंजल और जानवी, तुम दोनों अभी मीटिंग लीव कर सकते हो अभी।
मेरा नाम प्रांजल है, प्रंजल नहीं,
सॉरी
प्रांजल।
प्रांजल, सॉरी प्रांजल। तुम और
ओके।
जानवी मीटिंग अभी लीव कर सकते हो।
ओके।
ओह जानवी, तुमको प्रेजेंट करना था, लाइक तुमने कहा था ना कि तुम प्रेजेंट नहीं कर सकती ना, तो दैट्स व्हाई आई थिंक। ओके, ऑन दैट डे ओनली। ओह सॉरी सॉरी, यू कैन प्रेजेंट नाउ। ओके ओके। ओके जानवी, यू कैन प्रेजेंट नाउ। Wait, let me make you the host. मंजीत, आप एक बार सर को फोन कर सकते हैं क्या कि वो कब तक आएंगे मीटिंग में?
Okay, give me some time. And तब तक I think Janvi can start the presentation.
Yes, Janvi, you can start now.
हेलो। हेलो।
Yes, Janvi.
वो डॉक्यूमेंट मेरा जो है ना वो इस पे आ नहीं पा रहा है स्क्रीन पे, आई डोंट नो व्हाई। मतलब
अच्छा,
मैं
एक मिनट रुको, मैं ट्राई करती हूँ।
ओके ओके।
हेलो हेलो हेलो।
Yes, Harshniधि।
सर आए थे?
नहीं सर, अभी तक नहीं है।
अच्छा ठीक है।
Janvi, you can start now.
Okay. I'll try to conclude it fastly, because my presentation is very lengthy. I'll try to conclude it fastly. Okay. So first of all, I've made the comparison between the American forest law and the Indian forest law. So when we talk about the background of the American forest law and Indian forest law, so then we have to start from knowing that what is actually a forest is. So and how it helps us in our daily life and all that. So forest regulation plays a crucial role in supporting life on earth, maintaining natural balance, and impacting human cultures, social, cultural, and economic aspect. They also regulate the use, preservation, and conservation of natural resources. So uh, it also ensures the biodiversity and ecosystem resilience. Forest also serves as carbon sinks, absorbing and storing carbon dioxide, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and promoting sustainable forest management. They regulate water cycles, purifying water and preventing soil erosions, and safeguarding important watersheds and water supplies. Forest laws compromise conservation and economic interest, ensuring responsible extraction and long term economic gains. So, they also protect the rights of indigenous and local population, ensuring their involvement in decision making regarding forest management. Forest also serves as significant recreational areas, like with responsible tourism standards, ensuring natural habitat preservations. So in the background, we can see that hereby we will start to elaborate about the forest laws, not only of the India but also of the American, and there would be a comparison at last of both the forest laws. So now on the second page, the introduction starts. Yeah. So in the introduction, we can see that firstly, I've said about the America's National Forest Management Act of 1976. So it was the act which just oversees all the management related to National Forest Management Act. Matlab, everything about the forest is regulated by this act only. So the National Forest Management Act of 1976 is the main statute, and it oversees the management of national forest in the United States. It amended the Forest and Rangeland Renewable Resources Planning Act of 1974, which mandated the management of renewable resources on national forest lands. The act's primary goal are to protect national forests from harm from excessive logging and clear cutting. It mandates the US Forest Service to prepare national forest plans, establish guidelines for wood sales, and formulate regulations for timber harvesting. The NFMA, the short form of it, allowed public participation in forest plan creation and revision, and established several forest service trust funds and special accounts. And when we talk about the Indian Forest Conservation Act of 1980s, then it is a law in India that addresses forest conservation issues. It requires central government approval for forest land diversion for non-forestry uses, ensuring environmental preservation and economic development balance. Compensation for forest cover loss is given with the the net present worth determined by the diverted forest land. Consultation with tribal communities and state government is required before permitting diversion, any type of diversion. The act mandates afforestation or reforesting of non-forest land, and failure to do so may result in fines. The act recognizes deemed forests that have ecologically sensitive qualities and require central government approval. And when we talk about the scope of it, which is mentioned in the third page of it, um, um, can you show it to me? Yeah, thank you. So here we can see the scope and coverage of forest laws in both the countries. So in the USA, when we talk about the USA, so the National Forest Management Act covers the US Forest Service national forest and related lands, covering diverse habitats like dry plains, deciduous woods, and temperate rainforest. It requires land and resource management plans for each forest, considering multiple use concepts, sustained yield, and wildlife protection. Public participation ensures diverse viewpoints are also considered. So it also permits a variety of activities within the national forest, such as recreation, wildlife habitat preservation, watershed protection, and timber production. And when we talk about the Indian, so the Forest Conservation Act, it covers forest land with proprietary right in India, aiming to preserve diverse landscapes like dry areas, alpine meadows, and tropical rainforest. It controls non-forest use, requires national government authorization, as we have talked before, and balances development activities with forest protection. The act emphasizes the need to protect forest and animals, acknowledging their biological and environmental significance. Now, after that, on the fourth page, I have talked about the comparison between their scopes, actually. So here the comparison, as we can see, in the United States emphasizes multiple use management of forest, combining commercial and recreational goal with ecological conservation. Whereas in India, we can see that the land diversion is a key strategy for forest um, protection, with the Forest Conservation Act valuing ecological integrity. The National Forest Management Act of USA promotes public involvement in forest management plans. The US focuses on sustainable land management, while India's Forest Conservation Act focuses on ecological conservation and deforestation preservation. So, by this, we can see this comparison between their scopes. And now, on the fifth page, we can see that what are the historical events that influence the forest laws development in both the countries. Yeah, so as we can see that there are probably 3 to 4 historical events in both the countries which have influenced their forest laws development. And the first, in USA, we can see that it was westward expansion and timber demand. So in the 19th century in USA, there was a westward expansion, and due to that, uh, there was timber demand, and there was need for the timber in many areas like railway ties, fuels, and construction. And the necessity for the conservation of forest was very high on that time. Then we can see that the forest reserves and the forest management movement, here the creation of forest reserves happened in the late 1800s, and it was an attempt at conservation. And the expansion of forest reserve was greatly aided by the president of that time, Theodore Roosevelt. And many leaders of that time have helped in that conservation of that time. And the Weeks Act 1911, it gave the right to buy the private land. So the government of that time can buy the private land and can preserve the forest and watersheds of that land. And it was also the time that the national forest in the eastern United States was established, and it was made much easier by this. So when we talk about India, so the first reason is the British colonials. So the early forest policy was shaped by the British colonial government, and at that time the extraction of precious timber for the purpose of creation of revenue was very much in priorities. So the colonial administration proclaimed any territory as government forest. So because of the Forest Act of 1878, the local communities become very much strange about it, and uh, they started their customary forest resources and tried to conserve their forests. Also, the Chipko movement of 1970s, it also promoted the conservation and influenced it, as the communities which were in the Himalayan region, they participated in the non-violent protest called as the Chipko movement, and they told that they should stop the felling of the trees, and the joint forest management concept was of the 1990s, and it promoted the cooperation between the local communities and the forest administration for the conservation and the forest management. And in order to ensure that all the benefits of the forest will be distributed equally, the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 was made, and it highlighted that the local communities play a very what you can say it as uh, uh, what you can say it as the local communities plays a crucial role in preserving the biodiversity. Yeah, and then in the sixth page of it, there is major differences between the both countries forest laws. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So the major differences between both countries, there are total of 5 differences. So we will discuss it one by one. So the first is the legal framework, third is community participation, fourth is biodiversity conservation, and fifth is forest diversion and land use. So first of all, the legal framework and approach. So the US, the National Forest Management Act of 1976, it serves as the main source of guidance for the legal system in USA, and it has focus on multiple things of like the sustainable yield while balancing the social, ecological and economic factors. And it also says that every national forest must create a land and resource management plan. So the legal framework of this country USA is that the national forest must create a land and resource management plan that follows scientific guidelines according to the NFMA. And when we talk about the India, so the Indian Forest Act, which was modified in 1980, um, it here are the two examples about it. So the Indian forest of the Indian forest legislation. So historically, throughout the colonial era, the strategy was primarily concentrated on revenue generation and control. And the Forest Conservation Act limits the use of forest land. So the main difference is that the USA says that we have to create a land and resource management plan, and here the main focus is to limit the use of forest land, and to for users that other than the forest, and places a strong emphasis on the preservation of wildlife and forest. But also um, the thing which is actually not mentioned here, but I have heard that the Adivasis which live there in the forest, they can actually have some right to use the forest essentials for their daily usage. And the ownership and classification. So the US Forest Service is primary federal agency responsible for managing forest area. So the US Forest Service is primary federal agency, and it is responsible for the managing forest areas. And there are many zones inside the national forest, including the wilderness areas with minimal human impact. And in India, the local communities, the state, private companies may possess forest areas. So there, only the federal agency of USA are responsible for all the forest areas, and they have the control of the forest. But here in India, the local communities, the state, the private company, all have the possession of the forest areas. And there are three categories of forest here: unclassified, protected, and reserved, with each of its own set of rules. Protected and reserved, sorry, unclassified, protected, and reserved, there are three. And when we say about the community participation, so here in USA, it promotes the citizen involvement in the creation of forest management plans. So the local communities and the stakeholders, they can also participate in making the decisions how to conserve and how to collaborate with the techniques to conserve the forest. And when we talk about the India, so India's forest regulation has developed from the joint forest management programs. And they also recognize the rights of the people, the states, and also therefore they also have the possession of the forest. And the local communities can also conserve the forest. So now here in biodiversity conservation, US and India. So US ecosystem management techniques indirectly address biodiversity conservation. So the ecosystem management techniques of the USA can address the biodiversity conservation, and there are some special measures which um, which talks about the flora and fauna of that national forest. And in India, the preservation of biodiversity is directly emphasized by the Indian Forest Conservation Act. It means that all the things which were uh, in the act of Indian Forest Conservation Act must be followed. And India has set aside forest as reserves in order to save the wildlife habitat. So all the forests are called as the reserve forest, so that the flora and fauna can be um, uh, preserved. And the last, forest diversion and land use. So in US, there are strict rules, and uh, there are strict rules for the land use, and US forest management plans allow for sustainable activities, including logging, recreation, and conservation, as said before also. And in India, the Forest Conservation Act governs the use of forest land for uses other than the forest. So here the Forest Conservation Act governs the use of forest land, but for the uses other than the forest. So the such diversion require prior clearance from the federal government. So here the permission of the federal government is important, and it prioritizes the conservation above the development. So it means that for the Forest Conservation Act, the conservation is more important than the development. And finally, when we talk about the conclusion of this, so the US and India's forest laws reflect their unique historical, geographical, and socio-economic factors. The US emphasizes sustainable yield and multiple use management, while India's laws focus on modern conservation imperatives. The US promotes public participation in decision making through the National Forest Management Act, while India's Joint Forest Management (JFM) programs acknowledge local involvement. Both countries participate in national collaboration for sustainable development, climate change mitigation, and biodiversity conservation. Both countries constantly modify their legislative frameworks to address new issues and recognize the importance of sustainable methods that balance community involvement, economic exploitation, and environmental protection. Their forest laws reflect their commitment to long term resilience and health, reflecting a shared understanding of forests' role in biodiversity and climate change mitigation. So yeah, that's all. I've completed my presentation now.
Yeah, Janvi, it was great. It was a DP research report. मेहनत तो की है.
I know it. It was very lengthy, but I'm sorry for that. It was too much lengthy. Yeah.
No issue. Report अच्छा था.
Yeah, your report was quite good. Of course, if you make this आप अगर किसी बड़े टॉपिक पे से आप रिपोर्ट बनाओगे तो ऑफ कोर्स लेंदी तो बनेगा ही. पर शॉर्ट में बना रहे हो दैट मीन्स आप उसमें शॉर्टकट ले रहे हो. दैट्स नॉट ओके. यू आर मेकिंग इट बेटर देन इट्स गुड.
Yeah, yeah.
मुझे
Thank
तो
you.
दोनों का प्रांजल और जानवी दोनों का ही अच्छा लगा. जानवी का एकदम फुल फ्लेज रिपोर्ट था, डीपी रिसर्च किया हुआ. प्रांजल का भी एक्चुअली उसका शॉर्ट मतलब शॉर्ट तो था, लाइक ठीक था, जो टाइमिंग था उसका सही था. बट उसने सब लगभग सारे पॉइंट मेंशन किए थे और बहुत प्रिसाइज वे में ना उसने अच्छे से समझा दिया था जो उसको कहना था. तो मुझे दोनों का रिपोर्ट अच्छा लगा.
Nice. That's it. We have only two people here today.
एक प्रांजल ने तो बता दिया था और अभी ये तीन चार लोग अब तक रिपोर्ट दे चुके हैं. नैना शर्मा और फिर प्रांजल, जानवी. ओ सॉरी, तीन ही लोग, चार नहीं, तीन ही लोग.
Okay. पूरे एफसीए ग्रुप से सिर्फ 3 लोगों ने रिपोर्ट दिया है.
हम्म और दो तीन लोग ने ग्रुप पे तो रिपोर्ट भेज दिया है, बट उन्होंने प्रेजेंट नहीं किया है. तो फिर मैंने बोला भी था कि प्रेजेंट करना इम्पोर्टेंट है, लाइक सिर्फ रिपोर्ट बना करके आप दे दो, इससे काम नहीं चलेगा. कि फिर कोई फायदा नहीं अगर ये लोग प्रेजेंट नहीं करेंगे तो काम अधूरा ही रहेगा, क्योंकि बनाना प्रेजेंट करना दोनों काम था.
Hmm. Okay, those who are not active still अब जो अब तक भी एक्टिव नहीं बना रिमूव them from the group.
यस यस मंजीत. सर फोन नहीं उठाया.
No, no, sir will not join. He's quite busy today. Got
ओके
some urgent email.
ओके, नैना एंड जानवी, यू बोथ कैन लीड द मीटिंग नाउ.
If they want to say, okay, yeah.
हाँ, हर्षनिधि को कुछ डिस्कस करना था बट सर तो आए नहीं है. और हर्षिता का कहना है कि वो अगर दो के बाद ही ज्वाइन कर पाए, अभी वो बिजी चल रहे तो वो 2 के बाद ही मीटिंग ज्वाइन कर पाएगी. बट हर्षनिधि
Okay,
का कहना है कि वो न्यू ईयर से पहले मीटिंग हो जाता तो सही रहता.
sorry.
हर्षनिधि का कहना था कि वो न्यू ईयर से पहले अगर मीटिंग हो जाता तो
Okay,
सही
yeah,
रहता.
Harsh Nidhi, what was your plan? You were saying something in the group.
Yeah, so I wanted to like have a meeting because I think since a long time we did not have any meeting, have any core group ka meeting. So
Uh, Actually, we had some when you were absent. We had some meetings together. But yeah, of course, we can still nowadays
no
we can
core
also
group
add.
I thought ki core group ka
Yeah,
meet hua tha ki nahi. I was not sure ki.
okay.
I
Then
thought
of
we
course
will.
we can have meeting right now. So like if Sanjana is not able to join, it's okay. Then of course we can have without her also. So decide a
हर्षिता.
date. Then just decide a date on the group. Then we will meet. Probably tomorrow is if everyone's free, then we can.
Yeah, of course. If people are there, then only we'll have it. Otherwise, there's no point now.
हाँ यस मंजीत, अगर सर कल अवेलेबल है और आप अवेलेबल है तो
Hmm.
कल ही करा लीजिए.
Okay, okay. I will talk to sir later.
And कल we will try to कल तक हम will try to have a status कि भाई कहाँ पे कितना progress है. Because I
Hmm.
feel कि overall भी थोड़ा सा last month I think थोड़ा काम slow है. Apart from the content लोग बना रहे हैं वो घर से भेज रहे हैं, but I think people are not very interested or active.
Yeah,
So
that's
you could
true.
also filter out people.
Actually, in January we will have some offline meet because sir is also quite free, and maybe I will be also in Patna in January.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and from January we will have some new interns also, and from January we will start the proper thing. Like from there, I will be also quite free, and sir will be also quite free. So
Yeah,
from January we will start our proper thing. From last 3 4 months we didn't having any offline meet. Like
हाँ,
ये
in
बड़े टाइम
especially
से
offline.
ऑफलाइन मीट्स भी नहीं हो रहे, that's a big problem. Yeah, from January hope everything will be fine.
Yeah, and so for that we can plan out as to who will be online and who would be offline, and what all are we going to have in offline activities and online activities before January. So next 3-4 days probably, if we are free, if everyone is free from the core group, we can chart out the further course of action, and plus we can also work on like quickly, launching the newsletter, so that we have something, we have a start. So
Yeah.
I think, how many content pieces of content do we have, Sanjana?
In newsletter,
For newsletter.
as Nana said, they have 4 sections. और अभी
Okay, so
इन
Nana is looking into
या
newsletter.
Nana Sharma is looking into the
Yeah, yeah.
newsletter. तो
Okay.
4 sections उसने कहे थे, और फिर कुछ पोएम्स का तुम कह रहे थे, तो we can
हाँ, वो
add
poem का I think she's
1-2
sending.
poems we can
She
add.
sent me 2-3. वो I asked her कि जो भी अभी तक आया भेजो, I'll try to review, edit 1-2 दिन में, और 29 तक probably I'll send it back to her. But नहीं, अब वैसे एडिटिंग में तो आधा 1 घंटा जाएगा, तो कल भी हो सकता है I can send, but I'll see if I'm able to manage time tomorrow. Plus one thing we can do, कि जो भी अदर ग्रुप्स में है जिन्होंने न्यूज़लेटर के लिए वो नहीं किया साइन अप, या न्यूज़लेटर के ग्रुप में नहीं है, और वो खाली बैठे रहते हैं अगर पूरे टाइम, मीट ज्वाइन नहीं करते, तो यू कैन एज अ फॉर्म ऑफ पनिशमेंट और समथिंग, कि बिना इन्फॉर्म किए आप जब नहीं आ रहे हो, या बिना बताए एब्सेंट हो रहे हो, लगातार हो रहे हो, उनको एक कंटेंट दो लिखने के लिए, यू हैव टू राइट अ कंटेंट.
Actually, we have already given them so much time. Like मैंने मैसेज वगैरह पिछले मीटिंग से पढ़ा था.
आई
Like
नो, आई नो.
so
या
they have already assigned something. Still they are not doing, then just remove them from the group. After
अच्छा, in
that we will
case
give
of
them.
they have already been assigned something and then they are not turning up or not, in spite of several reminders, not like they could not do it for once or something,
Yeah.
but in spite of several reminders, if they are not, then you can like anyway remove them, because sir has already told no to remove.
Yeah.
So but then I was like giving an idea to somehow see if at the end of the day, if they're able to avail that one chance, कि हाँ भाई last chance है कि कंटेंट दे देते हैं, तो इस बार रिमूव नहीं करेंगे ये. सो इन दैट केस हमारा भी बेनिफिट होगा, और उनका भी थोड़ा सा ये हो जाएगा कि हाँ दिल. और एनी केस आई वुड सजेस्ट कि इवन इफ in spite of several reminders they are not turning up and we are finally planning to remove them, so it's just a slight request from my end, just inform them. Even if they say ki please don't remove me or something, remove them, but then at least inform them that okay, I'm going to remove you in the next 5 minutes, this is just to inform you, nothing else.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so so that at least
Yeah. Okay.
they
That's
can't
okay.
say that I was not even informed.
ओके. मंजीत, आपका कोई मीटिंग था ना 8:30 से?
Yeah. Actually, I have already joined that on the Google Meet. But
Okay,
Okay, so we'll
you
finish
can
this meet.
हाँ, yeah,
Okay.
you can leave this. I'll end the
okay.
meeting now.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, Harsh.
Bye.
Good night, Sandhya.
Good
Good
night.
night, Manjit. Good night, Sandhya. Bye.